And Chair, you are now live.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Annie. So first thing, a call to order. I will please call this meeting to order. It's 12:04 p.m. So I'll first do a quick roll call for an AV check, please. So Mr. Martin, you can still hear us?
Yes.
Thank you. Excellent. Ms. McKenzie?
Yes.
Wonderful, thank you. Mr. McQueen?
Yes, I can.
Excellent, thank you. And we have from the clerk's office, we have Chris Devining and Annie Sherry joining us as well. So thanks very much to both of them for all of their help. We've received regrets from Mr. Hollis and Councillor Cleary. So with that, I'll ask please for an approval of the minutes of June 7th, 2021. If anyone can please let me know if they have any corrections or amendments to those. Hearing none, I'll call for a motion to approve the minutes as circulated, please. If I could please have a mover and a seconder for that.
I'll move.
Thank you. Moved by Ms.
I'll second.
McKenzie. Thank you. Seconded by Mr. McQueen. So that the minutes of June 7th, 2021, the Investment Policy Advisory Committee meeting have been approved as circulated. That motion has passed. So the next order of business is the approval of the order of business and approval of additions and deletions. Ms. Clerk, are there any additions or deletions?
Thank you, Chair. I actually, before we go into the approval of order of business, I would actually just request that we have the standard vote on the approval of the minutes. I have it noted as moved by Liz McKenzie, seconded by Robert McQueen, but we did not have the actual vote on the motion. So if we could just finalize that vote, and then we can move on to this agenda item.
All right, may I please have a vote? All in favor, say yay.
Yay.
All opposed? Hearing none, I declare the motion's passed. Thank you, Annie. All right, so on to approval of the order of business and additions and deletions. And Annie, I believe you mentioned there were no amendments or additions?
Thank you, Chair. There were no requests for additions or any edits to the approval of the order of business for today.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So if we can please have a motion to approve the agenda as presented. A mover and a seconder, please.
I'll move it.
Moved by Liz McKenzie. A seconder, please.
I'll second it.
Oh, thank you. Seconded by Mr. Martin. So if I can call for the question, all those in favor?
Okay.
Yay.
Yay.
Thank you. All those opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. Thank you very much. So business arising from the minutes, there are none. The next item up for us to discuss is a call for declaration of conflicts of interest. Does anyone have a conflict that we should be aware of? Hearing none, we can proceed. So just to make a note, there is no consideration of deferred business. So with that, we'll move into section 7, and that is the Treasurer's report ending June 30th. So the report was circulated. I don't have a presentation for this. I was just going to speak to it if that's okay with the committee. So on the Treasurer's report, for the quarter, we had 4 investments at a total cost of $179 million versus 3 investments at a cost of $47 million the prior comparable period. So our strategy remains the same. We're allocating to our investment high interest accounts and purchasing government securities as our investment policy guideline outlines that we should. So our investment income is actually currently over budget. It's due to a higher than forecasted cash balance, and as well, the interest rate was a little bit higher than we originally forecasted. So you can appreciate forecasting with COVID has been quite challenging. So we were actually pleased to be able to note that our interest rates held in a little bit better than we had originally forecasted. So the total cash held in our high interest accounts was sitting at $587 million for the quarter. Currently, we're not holding any bonds, so staff will continue to look for opportunities to invest there. The money market rate of return for the quarter was 0.05%. If you asked me 20 years ago when I started my career if I would ever see rates like that, I wouldn't have believed you, but here we are. So we've had money market investments mature, and so as they roll off, we've been forced to reinvest at the lower rate. But you know, again, we go by our investment policy principles that we invest only in safe instruments. So part of that safety is obviously taking a rate such as that. So the rates in our high interest savings account are linked to prime. So as prime drops, so do those rates. So using the RBC Money Market Survey, which is the benchmark that we've selected, our 3-month rate of return is 0.16%, and 1-year return is 0.73%. Both of those are actually over the 5th percentile of the benchmark. So we're actually pleased with how the portfolio has been holding up in the environment. So we continue to outperform the benchmark, and that performance is due to the investment bank accounts. So the rates on the government portion of the portfolio just continue to be depressed. So looking forward, we don't expect much to change in 2021. So as the economy continues to recover from the impacts of COVID, the consensus is that we won't see interest rates start to rise until the latter part of 2022. So we can expect our performance in our portfolio accordingly not to sort of start to see more of an uptick until that time, because we're mostly invested in items that are linked to prime. So for our policy objectives, we maintain that we've met those objectives of the preservation of capital and liquidity and a competitive rate of return. So a bit short and sweet, I would like to ask if anyone had any questions.
Yeah, can I ask a question on the cash balances? So you mentioned cash balances are higher than we had budgeted, I guess. Is that because revenues are higher than we budgeted, or expenditures are lower or slower, right, than you budgeted, the timing of them?
Yeah, thanks very much. That's a great question. So mostly it's around that we haven't spent the money as fast as we thought we would. So we have certain expenditures we bring in with the municipal budget. We only budget for what we're going to spend. Like, that's how we determine our rate. We only bring in enough money so that our revenues will match our expenditures. So what's happened is there was a bit of a slower kickoff to the spending than we had originally forecasted or built into our forecast. So yeah, thanks for the question. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Great. Mr. Martin.
You say you have $0.
I'm sorry, we cannot hear you at all. It was cutting in and out. I don't know if maybe you want to try putting your question in the chat.
Can I try one more time?
Okay.
Do you have no investments in the short-term bond market?
That's correct. There's no investments in the short-term bond market at this point.
Is the lack of supply, or is it for an interest rate? Are you stretching for interest rates?
We haven't found any preferable interest rates that would that gave us a lift over what we were getting in the government portion of the T-bills and prom notes. Yeah, great question. I see you're muted now, so I hope I've answered your question.
Yes, thank you.
Oh, thank you. Excellent. All right. So with that, if there were no further questions or comments, we're okay. Thank you. So moving on to 7.1.1, the draft investment activities. So this is a report that we forward. So I believe you are all aware of this, but just to have it on record, what happens is we have the treasurer's report that we go through, and then a more formal, it's the exact same information that gets put into a staff report that is forwarded on. So what we're talking about now is that staff report that's going to be forwarded on. So we'll have a motion that the Investment Policy Advisory Committee recommend that the Audit and Finance Standing Committee forward the investment activities quarter ending June 30th, 2021 report to the Halifax Regional Council as an information item. So that motion requires a mover and a seconder, please.
I can move that. I can't
Thank you,
repeat it,
Mr.
but I can move it. Yeah.
Excellent. That's fine. Thank you, sir. Moved by Mr. McQueen. Seconder, please.
I can second that.
Thank you. Thank you, Liz McKenzie. And all those in favor, please say yay.
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 Thank you. All those opposed? Hearing none, I declare that motion passed. Thank you very much. So moving on to the next part of our discussion. So we have a requirement in our investment policy to review the policy annually. So I would like to suggest that we move that there are no additions or deletions or changes to the investment policy at this time. So just to provide a bit more background on that, the last time we changed the investment policy was 2019. It was just before COVID. The changes we made were among the allocation of our operating income. We made changes so that more of that operating income was allowed to be in our financial institutions versus government portfolios, government short-term money market instruments. As well, that policy introduced a semi-annual rebalancing. So what we did was we aligned our rebalancing with our two main influxes of cash. So we received tax income April 30th and October 31st of every year. So we determined those were optimal times for the rebalances. So those were the biggest changes made in 2019. Prior to that, the policy hasn't changed a whole lot. Like obviously with the corporate treasury, there's not a lot of things that we do. We're not getting into exotic instruments. We're not doing risky investments. So, we're pretty much limited to financial instruments. We get our exposure to financial institutions via high interest savings accounts. If we weren't doing that, what we would do is invest in, say, like a Royal Bank banker's acceptance, or a bearer deposit note, a BDN of a financial institution. We found that we get higher rates with our high interest savings accounts, so we get our exposure that way. On the government side, we invest in provincial government instruments, T-bills and prom notes. We do require that the province have a DBRS rating of R1 mid or higher. So I wouldn't recommend going lower than that at this point. So the reason we're not recommending any changes is that there's still a lot going on in the environment with COVID. It still feels a little uncertain in the market. Rates are continuing to be depressed. So just holding the line, at least for now, as far as the whole investment policy and our existing strategy. So that is staff's recommendation, but I would ask if anyone has any comments or questions that they'd like to discuss.
Yeah, just one question. So typically this policy review takes place once a year, or whether there's changes or not. Is there any thought to looking at it more often than that, given how the markets are changing rapidly? Or would it be next September?
No, that's actually for the committee to decide. So, I mean, if you'd like to look at it more frequently than that, happy to do so. And how look would that be? Would you guys like to take recommendations forward, or would you like us to look into certain items? Like, sort of what would you have in mind?
Well, I guess the point you make is that we're kind of in uncharted times here, and not sure when things are going to turn around. I think it would be, I guess we have the flexibility to make that decision, at our quarterly meetings. I don't know that there's a need for it right now.
Yeah, well, absolutely.
Yeah.
And thank you. That's a great point. If you guys came to me next meeting and said, hey, we really need to look at introducing commercial paper as a counterparty on the list, then we would look at that at that time. Honestly, we are committed, as per our investment policy, to formally look at it once a year. So this was the meeting to minute that and say we've looked at it. We're going to hold pat. If you want it even next meeting to bring something forward, we can start working on that. That's absolutely no problem. Yeah, and we usually just pick a meeting during the year. It's not necessarily every September. It's just whenever it sort of falls in. Like the last time we did it earlier in the year because we had hoped to make some changes, so we knew it might take a few meetings to work through and get everyone comfortable. And ensure everyone had sufficient time just to look at it. Like we would never come to a meeting and say, here are the changes we're recommending, approve them today. So what we would do is earlier in the year, we'd say, okay, these are the changes we're contemplating, here's the quarter, you can think about it, come back next meeting and we'll talk and see if it's something that the committee's comfortable with. Yeah. We're okay?
Yeah, no, I'm fine with that. I don't know if the other committee members are on the same wavelength, but
no, I think that was an
that's
excellent point. And to address, like as you mentioned, we are in uncharted territory, and I think that discussing some of these items as they become prudent on a go forward is how I would approach the situation, because I mean a lot of these projections that they're looking at now are for the coming 6 to 12 months, but I think it might be a little more timely as they arise to maybe look at how we would make some amendments then.
Works for me. Sounds great. So I don't think that actually doesn't require a formal motion or anything. This was just us minuting. We've had our annual policy review. Again, great points. If there's anything that you guys ever want to talk about in any future meetings, whether it's me as the co-chair or not, that's your role. You're absolutely, it's the right forum to bring it up. Even if in between meetings, if you needed to reach out, you're able to do so. Just if there's something you need us to research or look into. Yeah, great. Okay, so I think if there's no further discussion on the annual policy review, we will move to added items. So I don't believe there are any added items. So I think, sorry, Annie, I can not say that. So the date of our next meeting is December 6th, 2021. So we'll get geared up for the holidays and we can have a nice chat then as well. So if nobody had anything else they wanted to discuss, I'd make a motion to adjourn.
Moved.
Thank you. That's moved by Ms. McKenzie. Yeah. So the committee adjourned at 12:23 p.m.